You won't believe what happened on CNN's live broadcast. It started as a heated debate, but by the time it was over, Scott Jennings had humiliated Catherine Rampell so thoroughly, even the studio air felt heavier. This wasn't just another political argument. This was a takedown picture. The lights of CNN studio flash on the cameras, roll capturing every moment as Scott Jennings steps onto the set. But there's a certain tension in the air tonight. It's not just another political IC debate. This is personal. Right across from him sits Catherine Rampell, a liberal firebrand, notorious for her vocal critiques of conservative figures. She leans forward, prepared to tear into her opponent. The audience can already feel it. The stage is set for a confrontation. And Scott, calm, measured, but with an unmistakable sharpness in his eyes, knows exactly what's coming as expected. The studio felt tense from the very start, as the CNN reporter wasted no time launching into aggressive questioning. But the real breaking point came when the host turned the spotlight on Elon Musk. Let's talk about Elon Musk. She begins, her voice dripping with disdain. A billionaire with too much power who's been playing with fire, promoting ideas that could easily be linked to fascism. His ties to right-wing extremists, his support for anti-democratic policies. It's all there. Can you really defend him? Scott, the air thickens, the audience shifts on uncomfortably. Scott's lips curl into a thin smile. Defend him. No, Catherine, I'm not here to defend anyone. But what I will do is call out your baseless accusations. His voice is steady, but there's fire behind it. Elon Musk is a businessman who's made controversial decisions. Yes, but to throw around words like fascist without any credible evidence, that's dangerous. Ramel's face reddens, her eyes narrowing, but the rhetoric, his public statements, his alliances, the way he's pandered to far-right groups. This is not just a mistake. This is deliberate. Scott leans forward, his tone firm. You're more interested in spinning a story, Catherine, than looking at the facts. Musk is a vocal supporter of the Jewish community. He's publicly condemned anti-Semitism on numerous occasions. So where are you getting your fascist narrative from? Sounds to me like you're just repeating the narrative. The media wants to push. The tension in the room skyrockets. The audience is on edge. Scott doesn't flinch. Rampell glares at him, frustration bubbling up as she tries to refocus. Noon is denying that Musk has donated to causes. Maybe even causes you support share towards. But look at the bigger picture. He's not just a businessman, he's a political influencer, shaping narratives that harm democracy. Are you going to stand by him? Scott's eyes narrow. But his response is measured, every word deliberate. I'm not here to be Musk's spokesperson. I'm here to defend what's right, and what you're doing is casting baseless shadows on someone because of your own political biases. It's not about Musk. It's about you and your agenda. Rampell doesn't back down. And what's your agenda, Scott? To play the victim for a billionaire who's stoking division across the country. Scott's voice drops. My agenda is simple: to make sure people like you don't get away with painting a target on someone's back without any real proof. Musk is a complicated figure, but the truth is he's not the villain you want him to be. The audience is silent. The stakes are clear. This isn't just about Elon Musk anymore. It's about something much bigger. Catherine tries to regain her footing, but the damage is done. She's rattled. You know, Scott, I'm not done with this conversation, Scott. Gaze hardens, unflinching. You're not the one who decides when this conversation ends. Catherine, we'll see where this goes. The tension lingers. The showdown has just begun. The tension in the room was palpable. Scott Jennings wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Catherine Rampell. Let me get this straight, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. You throw around words like fascist without any evidence and then expect everyone to just accept it. No questions asked. Catherine frowned. Scott, you're deflecting. We're talking about Musk. No, Scott shot back. The issue is that you get a free pass to accuse people without proof. But the second someone challenges you, it's deflection. That's not how this works. Catherine tried to respond, but Scott didn't let her. You and the media like to use words like dangerous and fascist, but you ignore real threats. When it fits your narrative, remember those college protests last year? Anti-Semitism all over the place, But I didn't see you or CNN losing your minds over that. Why not? The audience murmured, sensing the shift. Catherine was caught off guard. Are you seriously comparing? She began, but Scott was already interrupting. Of course not. He said, his voice low and pointed, because it doesn't fit your narrative. Right? When it's Musk, every vague comment is a crisis. When it's extremist chanting in the streets, it's just complicated student activism. Catherine's face reamed. You're twisting my words. No, Catherine, Scott said, leaning in. I'm showing you the truth. The media controls the narrative. When Musk challenges that you label him dangerous, but you won't do the same when it's someone on your side of the aisle. Her frustration was clear now, but Scott wasn't backing down. You don't have any facts, Catherine, just label and headlines, and that's the problem. People like you don't care about the truth. You care about the story you're trying to sell. Catherine opened her mouth to speak, but Scott raised a hand. Oh, I know you'll point to the Nazi salute thing, but that's nonsense. You know it, I know it. You're just trying to make it fit your narrative. Catherine's grip on her notes tightened. Scott, I'm not making this up. Yes, you are. Scott interrupted. You're using whatever sticks you. You want fear. Not facts. For a moment, Catherine wassailed. The studio felt like it was holding its breath. Scott took the opportunity to press. This is the game. Catherine, the media doesn't care about the truth. They care about making a story bigger than it is, and they're doing it right now. With Elon Musk, the tension in the room was thick. Catherine's lips trembled. She wanted to fight back, but she couldn't find the words. Scott leaned back, shaking his head slightly. I feel sorry for you because deep down, you know I'm right, but you can't admit it. You're stuck in the script. Catherine's eyes widened with frustration. I'm not stuck in anything. Scott smiled, but there was no humor in it. Then prove it. Drop the buzzwords. Give me something real. Catherine bit her lip, but the words didn't come. The silence was deafening. Scott had called her out, and for the first time it was clear that Catherine Rampell didn't have an answer. Catherine Rampell wasn't done. She refused to let Scott Jennings control the conversation. She straightened in her chair, her voice sharper. Now, Scott, you can dodge all you want, but the facts remain. Elon Musk has repeatedly amplified dangerous rhetoric he's given a platform to extremists, and you're sitting here acting like that doesn't matter. Scott exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Dangerous rhetoric. There it is again. Catherine, do you ever stop to define what that actually means, or do you just slap it onto anyone who doesn't fit your preferred narrative? Catherine scoffed. I don't need to. Define it, Scott. His own words speak for themselves. Scott leaned forward, then say them right now. Give me the exact words that prove he's some extremist mastermind. Catherine faltered for half a second, then quickly recovered. He's echoed far-right talking points he's engaged with, white national figures, and Scott raised a hand. Stop. Echoed engaged with, that's vague on purpose, you know. What's missing from your list, Catherine? A direct quote. Something undeniable, but you don't have that. Do you? Catherine's expression darkened. Scott, this is not about a single quote. This is about a pattern of behavior. Scott smirked. A pattern. That's interesting because I've noticed a pattern too. Every time someone disrupts the media's control over public discourse, people like you find a way to label them a danger to democracy. It's predictable. Catherine clenched her jaw. This is not a game. Scott Musk has sallowed his platform to become a breeding ground for extremism. Scott nodded slowly. And yet somehow you and your friends in the media were just fine when Twitter was openly suppressing news stories that didn't fit your side of the aisle. No outrage, then no calls for accountability. Strange, isn't it? Catherine's fingers curled into a fist. You're changing the subject. Scott shrugged. No, I'm pointing out hypocrisy. If you actually cared about harmful rhetoric, you'd be consistent, but you're not. The audience was quiet, now hanging on every word. Catherine's frustration was boiling over. Elon Musk has aligned himself with known extremists in Scott. He shared their messages. He's engaged with them directly. You really expect people to believe that's just a coincidence. Scott's smile disappeared. I expect people to think for themselves, something the media really doesn't want them to do. Catherine's face was flushed, now her frustration turning into something closer to desperation. Scott, why are you defending him so hard? What's in it for you, Scott? Let out a quiet laugh. There it is when all else fails. Question motives, classic Catherine. I don't owe Elon Musk anything. I just refuse to let you rewrite reality to fit your agenda. Catherine exhaled sharply. Scott, you're enabling this. You're just as complicit as he is. Scott shook his head. No, Catherine. What's dangerous isn't Musk. What's dangerous is a media that manufactures outrage, decides who's allowed to speak, and then plays the victim when people push back. The tension was suffocating Catherine. Had nothing left to say. At least not yet. Scott knew. This wasn't over. The accusations would keep coming, but so would the truth. Scott Jennings leaned back, shaking his head. This isn't about Elon Musk. It never was. It's about a media machine that decides who's the villain and who's protected, and you, Catherine, are playing right into it, Catherine. Rampell scoffed. Oh, please. Scott, the media doesn't decide anything. We report on the facts. And the fact is, Musk has created a platform that fuels hate speech. Scott smirked. Right, because the media has such a great track record of being honest, brokers of truth funny. How when Twitter was banning stories unfavorable to certain political figures, no one at CNN seemed to care, but the moment Musk takes over and allows free speech, suddenly it's a dangerous platform. Catherine's face tightened. You're changing the subject. We're talking about Musk and the extremist. Rhetoric he amplifies. Scott's tone sharpened. No, we're talking about selective outrage. The media has spent years deciding which stories deserve outrage and which get buried. Convenient, isn't it, if it supports their side? It's necessary dialogue. If it challenges their narrative, it's harmful. Rhetoric. Catherine shook her head. Scott Musk's influence is dangerous. His reach, his power, it's different. Scott let out a short laugh. The real issue isn't it control. The media doesn't like that. Musk disrupted their monopoly on information. He took away their ability to control what people see, and now they're panicking. Catherine's voice grew sharper. No one is panicking. Scott tilted. His head, really? Because it sure looks like it. The media is obsessed with Musk, dissecting every word, every move, every tweet. Meanwhile, real issues, crime, inflation, the border crisis, get a fraction of the cover. Why? Because it's easier to keep people angry at Musk than to have them ask real questions. Catherine exhaled, trying to regain ground. Scott, we cover those issues. But Scott leaned in. No, Catherine. You cover what benefits you. You push narratives that keep people distracted, and anyone who dares to challenge that gets labeled dangerous. The studio was silent. The tension between them was electric. Catherine pursed her lips. Musk is not the victim here. Scott smirked. Neither is the media, but they sure love to pretend they are. Catherine had no immediate comeback. The conversation had shifted, and for the first time it was clear Scott wasn't playing their game. He was exposing it. Scott Jennings didn't let up. He could see it. Now Catherine Rampell was on the defensive, struggling to keep control of the narrative. He leaned in slightly, his tone calm but unwavering. You know what I find fascinating, Catherine? The way the media and the left pick their battles. It's not about principle, it's about convenience. Catherine rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go. Scott ignored her. You and your colleagues claim to stand against misinformation, against harmful rhetoric. Yet where was this outrage when left-wing figures spread blatant lies, when violent protests were called mostly peaceful, when politicians, from your side of the aisle, pushed false narratives without consequence? Catherine's mouth tightened. Scott, that's a ridiculous false equivalency. No, Catherine, it's the very definition of hypocrisy. Scott shot back. You want accountability. Then let's apply it fairly. But that's not what happens, is it? When a liberal voice spreads misinformation, the media shrugs. When a conservative does it, it's a threat to democracy. Catherine's voice sharpened Scott. Are you seriously going to pretend that right-wing figures aren't responsible for fueling division in this country? That's the problem. The right defends people like Musk, like Trump, no matter what they say or do. Scott chuckled, and the left doesn't. Are you telling me the media hasn't spent years covering? For their own, you're upset that conservatives defend their figures. Yet the left does it constantly, and you expect people not to notice. Catherine's frustration was boiling over. Now the difference is Scott. We hold people accountable. Scott raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Then tell me, where was the accountability when left-wing activists pushed conspiracy theories about Russian collusion for years? Where was the outrage when misinformation about Supreme Court justices led to actual threats against their lives? Funny how some rhetoric is dangerous and some is just political discourse. Catherine hesitated. She knew Scott had a point, but she wasn't about to concede Scott. This isn't about what happened years ago. It's about what's happening now, and right now, Elon Musk is giving extremists a platform. Scott shook his head. This is exactly my point. You want to focus on Musk because it's convenient, because it distracts from everything else. The economy is struggling, crime is rising. The border is out of control, but you and your media friends would rather talk about Musk's tweets. Catherine's face was tense. Those issues get covered. Scott smirked barely, and when they are, it's downplayed but tone offhand comment from Musk, a front-page scandal. And that's why people don't trust the media anymore. Catherine exhaled sharply. Scott, people don't trust the media because of bad faith actors spreading lies and division. Scott nodded slowly. You're half right. People don't trust the media because they've seen the double standards for themselves, and no matter how much you spend it, they're